Hey everyone, today we've got an update for the day before. This is the upcoming Open World Zombie Survival MMO that as of now is still one of the most wish-listed titles on all of Steam. I've covered this game a handful of times, mostly focusing on what I consider to be major red flags from both the studio developing it and their poor history of releasing and abandoning games, but also just looking strictly at the gameplay footage that they've released for the day before through these numerous trailers over the past year, and the fact that it all seems fake isn't the right word. Staged, I would call it. All of the footage that they've released seems very staged and not like actual real gameplay. Now, I do believe that the game is real in as much as it's being made. There are people creating this thing and it will release and be playable at some point in the future. But at the same time, I get the sense that what they've shown is a very inaccurate representation of what we will be getting come release. And ultimately, I suspect the game will end up a total disaster. So we have got a few new updates this week, as well as things that have come to the surface in the time since my last video on this game. So let's jump into it. The first big thing was a new gameplay preview. This came from the NVIDIA CES showcase. It was roughly 1 minute long and consisted of a mix of static environmental shots, which I'll say these looked like some pretty cool environments. And then there were a few short gameplay clips with it all wrapping up with what appeared to be cinematics. As I was watching this, I thought, sort of like with the previous day before gameplay videos, that it all looked and felt a little off. Initially, I couldn't pinpoint exactly why or what it was, but after watching back the video a few more times, I realized two major things that stood out. Throughout the entire gameplay sections, all of the camera movement and aiming in their footage seemed like it wasn't being controlled by an actual player and instead was simply scripted movement that they were recording. If you pay close attention to how the camera moves and how the player is aiming, it feels very unnatural, in some ways way too smooth, but then also at the same time too kind of slow and clunky for what a real player would actually do. I've played a lot of games myself. I've watched a lot of gameplay footage of other people playing games. It almost doesn't seem like a human is controlling this. I've seen a lot of theories as to what that could potentially be. This was a similar complaint that's been brought up in a lot of the older footage that we've seen of the day before. Those similarly looked and felt a little unnatural, and I've seen a lot of comments from people saying, hey, is there a real player actually playing this? What does that mean? Why would you do this? From my understanding, the biggest benefit of doing something like just recording and showing scripted gameplay is that you can hide performance issues, and you can bump up the graphical fidelity without affecting the performance. I'm not saying that this is all make-believe and they just threw this together, but I am saying within the game engine, within the game that they're developing, that they are not comfortable to show actual, honest-to-goodness live gameplay because there are probably major issues that they would run into if they were showing actual gameplay. And then there were the animations, and particularly I would like to point out the muzzle flash. This looks bad. I thought it immediately, but I wasn't sure like what about it looks bad. Going back and recording and then slowing down the footage, moving it frame by frame, it made me realize the muzzle flash isn't animated. They basically just periodically for a single frame kind of plop in this static image that they use as a flash. Now I went through some gameplay of some other shooters that I've been playing recently to confirm that I wasn't crazy in this, that there was something about this that wasn't normal. And yes, it's true. Going through and slowing down, moving frame by frame on any other shooter, games that have guns that are firing, that have muzzle flashes, all of them will have multiple frames of animation with the muzzle flash actually like materializing and then fading out to represent muzzle flashes. This game, they're just like plop an image and then it disappears, plop an image, it disappears. It's not animated at all. Okay, so maybe the gameplay is scripted, and yeah, the muzzle flash animation is bad because the animation part of it is non-existent. Who cares? Oh, sure, yes, I get that. But I'll just say the whole reason I am even bringing these things up is because they are once again being added onto the pile of concerns, which ultimately is a shame because I would love a new great open world zombie survival MMO. The reality is though, as time goes on and the more and more things that pop up about this game, it looks like probability is the day before will not be that. And that is a real bummer because I want good games. I really enjoy and think there's a lot of potential for more future games in this open world zombie survival MMO genre. Just doesn't look like the day before is going to deliver whatsoever. And a lot of us are just kind of built up on the hype, on the promise of that first trailer. as well as the premise and the genre. So that was the first new thing, but then shortly after we got something else. A couple of hours after the NVIDIA gameplay reveal, the developer released a new video titled The Life at Fantastic. Now they teased this on various social media platforms by claiming this was going to be a big new reveal, sharing some exciting details on the development of the day before. In reality, this was basically just a vlog, and it was not good, but also turned out to just be an advertisement for something else, which is something they've done before, riding on the hype of the day before. Let me break this down for you. So this was a 5-minute vlog, and I'll say it seems clear to me throughout most of this, they're just trying to have some lighthearted fun. They have a bunch of different skits that they set up, a whole bunch of scripted moments, a lot of it non-game related. Like there was one scene about one of their developers being evicted from their apartment. There were other scenes of various people dancing and singing. You know what? I'm all for a good time. Enjoy yourself. It's just a lot of this came across as a wee bit awkward, let me just say. And I know all about awkward. I consider myself one of the kings of awkward social interactions, so I don't blame you for having some awkward moments in your videos. I've got plenty of them. I think what's more so is that they showed basically jack squat for the game, aside from a few brief clips of some of their developers working at their computer, and there was about 12 or so seconds where they flashed between a character creator, weapon modding, and talking with an NPC. The entire rest of the video, though, more or less amounted to, we're making the game, everyone, promise, and we're having a fun time doing it. And yeah, good on ya, enjoy your work, but billing this as a big reveal about the day before's development, it was not that. Also, however, as I was watching this the very first time, I was half convinced that the entire video was actually just an undisclosed advertisement. The reason being, they mentioned this continent app by name numerous times throughout the video, going as far as to show the logo on screen while having skits and then verbally just talking about, hey, this app is really great. It's been good for keeping the team organized as we work remote from across the globe. The section that was focused on the app and them using it lasted for like the first 3 minutes out of the 5-minute video, and it kind of seemed like a product placement. Watching the video back a second time, it became very clear to me this entire thing was focused on the app. So I posted about this on Twitter, being like, hey, this is kind of weird. And then someone in the comments pointed out to me that the Continent app is made by Fantastic. It is their app. This video that was supposed to be about the day before's development, how it's going, what they do to work on the game, it was actually just an advertisement for another one of their products. And if you needed any more convincing, shortly after the video was published onto their YouTube channel, they updated the description with a link to download the Continent app, and then they also have a pinned comment. Neither of these two things were there when the video first went live, because they wanted to pull people in thinking they were going to see the day before. Instead, they were just advertising another one of their products. Now, can Fantastic, a software developer, advertise other products that they're working on? Yes, of course they can. But once again, just like they did with the reveal of Prop Night, one of their most recently released games, they appear to just be riding the wave of hype around the day before to push their other products, which as a company, of course, they have every right to do so, but it does just leave a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth. Just something seems wrong. Just a bit, don't you think? That is the two most recent updates. We had that 1-minute gameplay clip, and then we had what was supposed to be a behind-the-scenes development of the game turn out to just be an ad for a Teams equivalent software where you can chat with other people from across the world, whatever. Since the last time we covered the day before, which was back in July of 22, there's been a few additional things that we've noticed that I just want to mention here. So going back through all of the footage that was released so far, I started picking up on some similarities between the day before and other games. There's the obvious general comparisons to like The Division, Last of Us, or Days Gone, in terms of the setting, in terms of the third-person perspective, in terms of the locations and kind of the graphical styling. Yeah, sure, there are similarities there, but more specifically, some of the areas that they've shown appear to be copied from other games. The first one is the Spider-Man Miles Morales Mall. I saw a few comments about this in various threads about the game that people said, hey, that looks really familiar to the Spider-Man Mall. And yes, looking at the Spider-Man Mall, I get the similarities that are drawn between the mall that's been shown for the day before, but at the same time, it's also just a big multi multi-layered mall with some glossy floors, escalators. It looks like a mall. So I wasn't so convinced on that one, but I saw what people were talking about. But then I saw the relation between the gas stations. In that one bit of gameplay footage, after riding through the mud with their Jeeps, they arrive and break down at this gas station. To me, it just looks like a gas station in the middle of the wilderness. But people said, you know, that looks a lot like the gas station in Life is Strange. So I went through, I looked at it, and it looks a lot like the gas station in A Life is Strange. As I looked closer, there were so many similarities to the structure, the layout, and even some of the coloring choices that I started to feel like they might be copying it. So you've got the outside layout of the gas station, which is very similar, things like the location of the pumps, but then also where the gas station is in relation to the road, some of the trash bins, the fact that the gas station is wrapped in this fence in a near identical manner. Both the gas station itself has a fence around the perimeter, and then right across the street, there is also a fence on either side, thick wooded trees. I mean, it's like an identical layout. But then you take a look at the top of the buildings, and their logo for the gas station is also nearly identical from its colors to the font and the logo. It is a blue sign with white font that is arced over a hot dog. These look like practically the same thing. And then if you head inside of the gas station, there is also this wood paneled fishing and hunting section in the corner of the shop. It looks very, very similar. It kind of seems as if they saw the gas station in A Life is Strange and decided to just rebuild it within their game. Is that a crime? No, unless they stole source code or assets to make it, it's not a crime. It does feel a bit lame if they are actually just like taking the exact layout of this gas station in another game and then just replicating it in their own. I guess you could view it as an homage, but there's just so many things that keep layering on top of each other that give a real bad feeling around the day before. I'd also like to point out the fact that if you compare the most recent gameplay showcases to the very first reveal, visually the game looks to be way worse in my opinion. The lighting, the textures, the animations, everything looks to have been downgraded. I want to acknowledge that throughout the course of development, many games will often have to pull back on their visuals from their initial targets. I also want to acknowledge that because there is a difference in time of day, one being night with the illumination just from various electrical light sources versus one being in the daytime where the most recent footage is, and one being set in the city and one being set kind of more in a mixed environment, we can't expect them to look identical when it's different times of day, different atmospheric elements, different lighting to be expected. Putting them side by side, it looks drastically downgraded, and I think this could lend more credit to the initial suspicion, which is that that first trailer was a very, very curated vertical slice, and then as time went on and they've built out more of the game, they've been unable to reach that level of fidelity and have had to scale it back. Now again, this is not uncommon. Think about how many initial gameplay trailers we've seen that have looked way better than what we get at release. A developer like Ubisoft is notorious for this. You look at examples like Watch Dogs and Rainbow Six Siege, and of course The Division. Those are games that their first reveals looked dramatically better than what they ended up on delivering. It's not unheard of, but I think it's just something else that is worth noting. You know, and a lot of this might sound light nitpicking. I need you to realize though that this all comes within the context of the development studio and their less than stellar history. I went into some big detail in my last video, but I just want to quickly recap. Fantastic started out as a small indie developer that was founded in 2015. Their first project, The Wild 8, was a top-down survival action game set in Alaska. It first released into Steam Early Access in February 2017 and initially had fairly positive reviews, but not too long after things took a turn. Just a couple months after the release, the player base had already dropped down to an average of about 100 concurrent players, at which point, after collecting the money from their initial sales and realizing the game was dying very quickly, they decided to stop supporting it altogether, and they sold off the rights to their publisher to move on to their next game. That was Dead Dozen, a first-person multiplayer horror game, their second Steam Early Access title. It launched in March 2018. Note that this is just 1 year after the early access release of their prior game. Not a lot of time to make a good game. Well, it wasn't a good game. Dead Dozen was an immediate flop, getting entirely negative reviews for being full of bugs, having poor performance, constant crashes, and just not really being good at all. The player count peaked on launch day at 81 concurrent and then dropped down to 14 just a week later. 3 months later, they posted that they would be ending further support and development of the game, abandoning the title but still leaving it up on Steam, where it remained available for purchase for another couple of years. On to the next thing. 1 month after halting development of Dead Dozen, they released the Radiant One, a story-driven adventure game for phones, which according to reviews is 20 to 30 minutes long. I am no phone game connoisseur. I'm gonna say that's a pretty small game. And then finally, we arrive at their most recent title, Prop Night. This was actually first revealed during a live stream event for the day before. Is a game that combines elements of Prop Hunt and Dead by Daylight. It's basically a mashup of those two. The game did see some early success, but it does seem to have fallen off. Massive drops in the players, and the game is sitting at about a 60% rating on Steam, which puts it at a mixed review score, with most of the complaints stemming around bugs, balance, the low player count, and lack of support. To their credit, however, unlike their prior two Steam releases, they do not appear to have fully abandoned this game, at least not as of yet. All of this is to say, this developer just does not have a good history. They've released small-scale games, many of which have been relatively bad, half of which they have straight up abandoned. Honestly, the only reason I think they haven't yet abandoned Prop Night is because they have the spotlight of the day before currently on them as a studio. I brought this up in the last video as well, and I saw a lot of comments of, well, what do you expect them to do? If they've got 14 players, for example, in the Dead Dozen, you expect them to support it for years? No, but I don't expect them to abandon games after just a couple of months. That's the promise of Steam Early Access, is that you're releasing a game that's unfinished and you're gonna finish it and then fully release it. They haven't done that for any of their games. They just straight up abandon as soon as the player count drops. And that, if nothing else, is foreboding and not a good sign. If the day before comes out and it has any major issues or any big drops in player count, we just need to, I guess, at least have the expectation that if the day before comes out and it isn't a smash hit or it dies fairly quickly, your money's probably going down the drain because they are probably going to abandon it. They have a history of abandoning it. This is just the developer's track record. That's all it is. So yeah, to put it simply, they don't have a good history of A, releasing a good game, of B, supporting their released games post-launch, and if I were to add a C, I just want to point out that everything that they've made so far has been very small in scope and scale of the game, of the play space, of everything. They're just small games. So for them to all of a sudden be working on what they are calling an open world survival MMO, it just seems like such a far stretch from what they've done up until this point that it doesn't leave me very confident that they can or will actually do it. Well, we'll be finding out sometime soon, because as of now, the day before is still on track to release on March 1st, 2023, which, unless they announce yet another delay, I expect it will actually happen. I think that so much of this game looks bad, but my guess is yes, they will release it, and it probably will be a total disaster. Really, we've yet to see any actual gameplay as far as I'm concerned. Everything they've showcased, I am convinced, is scripted to one degree or another, whether it's scripting the things that happen as the player moves or whether or not it just hasn't actually been a player moving. I think there's a real solid chance that all of that has been fake up until this point in an effort to hide any issues that exist while the game is actually being played. It is good to have a healthy bit of skepticism towards anything that is being advertised or marketed towards you. This is true for any game that is not yet released. Although I generally am excited about games and like looking forward to games, I fully acknowledge that they're showing us the best they have to offer when they are showing games early. Knowing that, a bit concerning that this is the best they have to offer, and even that on display has some serious issues when you pay close attention. You dive into the studio's history on top of that, some of the strange things where they're using the hype of the day before to market and announce Prop Night, to market and announce an app that they have. All of this stuff just comes together to add more and more and more layers that have me thinking, no, not that the day before is a scam, not that it's fake, not that it's not going to release. They're not selling anything yet. I do think it's going to release, but expect it to be a mess, a total mess, possibly unplayable garbage. And if it is, expect that there's a decent chance, as their history has proven, that they will shortly thereafter abandon the game. We are now currently under 2 months away from the March 1st release, And I cannot wait to see how this all turns out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you next time.